Good evening, everyone. My name is Cindy McGuire, and I'm the Programming and Marketing Coordinator for the Leavenworth Public Library. Thank you for joining us as we kick off our National Library Week celebration. I'm pleased to welcome our special guest, Lea Petrie, the Executive Director of the Kansas City Jazz Orchestra. Lea is a Kansas City native and brings her love of music and more than 15 years of fundraising experience and arts administration to KC Jazz Orchestra. Most recently, she served as the project manager for the city's inaugural Open Spaces Art Experience and has been a part of the fundraising teams at the Kansas City Ballet, Nelson Atkins Museum of Art, and the Lyric Opera of Kansas City. She earned her Bachelor of Arts in Theater and Spanish from Missouri State University. Lea and her husband, Will, live in Central Hyde Park with their 2 sons. Welcome, Lea.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, and thanks for inviting me to be here tonight. I'm honored. Let me go ahead and share my screen here. Let's see here. Share. And, all right, and from the beginning. Slideshow. There we go. All right. Let me see if I can get everybody's faces on here, or at least their squares. All right. So as Cindy mentioned, I'm the Executive Director of the Kansas City Jazz Orchestra, Lea Petrie. I started at the orchestra in January of 2020. It was kind of like, welcome to the Jazz Orchestra. Your first major initiative will be guiding the organization through a pandemic. How about it? So here we are. But I'm absolutely thrilled to be on board. It's been quite a ride, and I've really enjoyed the time getting to know all the people involved with the Jazz Orchestra. But tonight I'm going to spend a little bit of time on my background and how it fits into the past, present, and future of Kansas City Jazz Orchestra. But I really would like to emphasize the importance of the role we all play in the arts and entertainment and cultural industries of the United States. And I'll explain that more in detail as we go along. But first, I was going to say, let me get to know you, but I actually can't see anybody's faces. Let's see if I can get everybody on here. There we go. So, John, I see you, and I already know the answers to your questions, but you know, who here enjoys jazz? Give me a hand. Who has attended a live performance or any performance at all in the last, we'll say 5 years, because we've been in a pandemic. So obviously everything's been kind of shut down. Yeah. That's good. And does anyone here play jazz? Jazz musicians? No? Okay. Well, I'm going to give you a little introduction to our band. This is an earlier recording of the Kansas City Jazz Orchestra. Just going to play a few minutes for you.
Here's a little tune you'll know, made famous by the chairman of the board. Come fly with me, let's fly, we'll fly away. If you could use some exotic booze, there's a bar in far Bombay. Come and fly with me, let's fly, we'll fly away. Come fly with me, let's float down to Peru. In Llama Land, there's a one-man band, and he'll toot his flute for you. Come and fly with me, let's head up in the blue. Once I get you up there, where the air is so rarefied, we'll just glide, absolutely starry-eyed. Once I get you up there, I'll be holding you so very near. 'cause we're together. Weatherwise, it's...
All right, so that's our orchestra. It's even more fun if you can dance to them too. As you can see, this was a KPR dance a couple of years ago. But before we go into my background, which you can see, it is amazing to see us on stage. So hopefully, if you haven't been, John, I know you have, if you haven't been, it's you know, the energy is just amazing. But here's a little background on the Jazz Orchestra before I go into my background. So Kansas City Jazz Orchestra was founded in 2003 by musician and educator Jim Mayer and Eugene Hall, who was an attorney and played the piano, and both saw a need for big band jazz performance ensemble in Kansas City. Eugene is still on our board, in fact. The 18-member orchestra performed mainly big band arrangements in a variety of locations. The first concert was held at Unity Temple on the Plaza and featured the legendary Marilyn May. That was in November of 2003. Since then, performances have taken place all over the place, all over the city, including the Folly Theater. We have a 14-member board of directors. They govern and kind of steer our organization, give great advice to us staff. And we are a staff of 3. We have myself, the executive director, we have an artistic director, and then we have our colleague, Mary. Mary is our finance and marketing manager. But over the years, we've experienced all the typical ups and downs that performing arts organizations typically experience. And but the board has been pretty savvy financially. And because of that, the orchestra has managed to prevail each time it's been difficult and come back better than ever. So in 2015, the performances were moved from the Unity Temple to the Kaufman Center for the Performing Arts in Hillsburg Hall. So that was definitely a step up because it is acoustically superior to really any place, I would argue, in this nation. We typically perform 4 main stage performances a year and are looking forward to finally performing Bird Lives, which is a tribute to Charlie Parker's 100th birthday. Well, except he's gonna be 101 by the time we perform it, but it's just a program we could not quit. We couldn't abandon because it was so exciting and important. So hopefully in October, when we can resume performances again, we'll be able to share that with the Kansas City community. So we will also perform a holiday program with the gospel feel and a contemporary jazz program called Just the Two of Us. And we'll feature Kirk Whalum, who is a really exciting guest artist who's going to come in and perform with us. And we'll end our season with a celebration of Kansas City style standards from the 1930s called Roaring KC. So we're very excited to get back in that theater again when we can. I do want to mention, however, the orchestra began as a Duke Ellington style big band, but as every organization, musical organization knows, you can't just continually play the same standards year or the same songbook standards year after year. You have to keep things fresh and new. And thankfully, our artistic director, Clint Ashlock, loves to create new compositions and arrangements. And so that also contributes to the jazz genre. I want to state up front that I'm no jazz expert. Clint is, and you can go talk to him and hear him wax poetic on, you know, all the chord progressions and riff styles. But that said, I do very much enjoy listening to jazz, and I'm joyfully learning about the history and discovering who the main and up and coming players are in the jazz world. And my mother played a lot of jazz for me while I was growing up, and we had neighbors who were musicians, jazz musicians, and they're still performing today. I still see them in clubs around Kansas City. So it's exciting. It's all kind of come full circle. They wouldn't recognize me today. I probably looked more like the picture on your screen. So I still enjoy all kinds of performances, not just jazz. And it's because of the people in my life, really. I had a teacher who took me to the Nelson Atkins Museum, my aunt who took me to a Broadway show at Starlight Theater. I had a band director who put malice in my hand and was like, learn to play the xylophone. I also played the flute too. And, excuse me. And I had a college professor who actually talked me out of being an interior designer and into being in tech theater and backstage. So I would not necessarily consider myself an artist per se, or an aficionado, but I would more consider myself an arts advocate because I love it all. So I did enjoy going to and being a part of plays, taking ballet lessons, as you can see, playing the flute in auxiliary when I was in high school. I also loved getting my hands into clay in the pottery studio. One photo I could not locate was me looking super cool at age 15. I'm like sitting in front of a stage, clearly waiting for this amazing concert to start. And you would think that I was waiting for U2 or REM or Cake or whoever was popular at the time, but nope. It was KC native and jazz guitarist Pat Metheny. But I still very much enjoy his music. But I was a theater major at Southwest Missouri State University, which Cindy mentioned earlier. And it'll always be SMS to me though. In college, my emphasis was lighting design, part of tech theater, and stage management, but not acting. And there was a Broadway star come university professor who will remain nameless, but he proclaimed to our 101 class that we needed to understand why it was that we did what we did in the arts. And I wasn't totally sure about that, but what came to me first was that the arts remind us that we're human. And it's the place where we can also work out those very human emotions, especially our stories, but including celebrations and sadness and controversy and angst and happiness. And then the next thing he said was, he said, Broadway is also just an address, not important at all. But in the same breath, and he said it was the utmost important address and that we should all be really thrilled to get to Broadway. I took the former to heart as well, because I believe that there are a lot of addresses where arts can happen, and it's not just Broadway. But moving back to Kansas City, my parents were more than eager to see me return to return their college investment and demand to know when I was going to get a job. Tomorrow, I said. And tomorrow I started working part-time, temporarily, seasonally, selling tickets for the Kansas City Ballet. And after a time, I had inquired about becoming a more permanent fixture there, and were there any other places in the organization that needed my help? Why, yes, they said. It was the development department. Here I am. They installed me in that development department, and I didn't know the first thing about fundraising, but I sure did learn. But I was like, all right, let me have it. So, but how fulfilling it ended up being to be a fundraiser when you're as passionate about the arts as I am, and then you're spending time with all these people who are passionate about what you're doing, and they love what your company's doing, and they think it's important to the community. And they tell you about the dance that made them cry, the song that reminded them of their mother, and the painting that just touched a heartstring. And it reminded them all of all the human emotional things. And this kept me charged up, definitely, as I worked with donors at the ballet and at the Nelson Atkins and connected with people at the Lyric Opera. I had completely forgotten that I was going to move to LA, where the arts were more prevalent and the beach was definitely more my style. I may not have gotten connected with the Kansas City Jazz Orchestra had I not decided to take a break from fundraising a few years ago and decided to try my hand at project management. And this was for open spaces. It was supposed to be a 3-day arts festival per Mayor Sly James's arts initiative. And it turns into, from a 3-day festival to a 10-week festival. It truly was like Gilligan's Island. It was more than a 3-hour tour. And it was full of hijinks. And it was also just encompassed all the things. I wouldn't trade it for the world because it was really incredible. I worked with about 40 different visual artists and then nearly 100 performing artists. And so it was really amazing to get to see that come to fruition after so much hard work. We hired a curator from New York, and one of the first things he did was say, you need to connect me with Clint Ashlock at the KC Jazz Orchestra. And I want to commission Mary Lou Williams' Zodiac Suite. And I want to make sure that we commission them and that they are paid fairly to do so. And so that is what I did. This is a photo of the actual performance. It was over 10 weeks. So there were lots of different performances throughout the day, and just, lots of different crowds that came and went. It was really exciting. This was also a really big year for the KC Jazz Orchestra because they had just performed at the Inner City Jazz Festival in Hanover, Germany, and then took a little hop over to Szczecin, Poland to perform there too, both of our sister cities. In fact, this October, we will welcome the Hanover Jazz Orchestra back to Kansas City, where we'll perform together at the Johnson County Community College Carlson Center and kind of have a conversation of the bands, if you will. We decided we didn't like the word battle of the bands. So, but here's a picture of the orchestra playing at the Inner City Jazz Festival in Hanover. That was in 2018. One of our most important initiatives right now, though, is education. And we recently started involving our guest artists in workshops and master classes. And before my time, it was just before I got there, before the shutdown, we had Benny Golson, the legendary Benny Golson, come and perform with our orchestra, but he also participated in a critique with students from at JCCC and the American Jazz Museum. And he gave them very valuable feedback, something you just don't get very often. You definitely don't get it from the legends. It's usually your instructors in college. But he sat there and gave his time to these young musicians, and it's really exciting for them. So we're trying to make that happen more and more. We facilitate many master classes and workshops, and can't wait to get back in the schools, of course, once everything kind of opens up again. And we were able to do this because of generous startup money that we received a few years ago. All right, here's something. If you've attended a Kansas City Jazz Orchestra concert, then this might look a little familiar to you. If you haven't, well, here you go. Oops, sorry. You're so close to me. All my wildest dreams come true. I need no sunlight to enchant me. If you'll only grant me the right to hold you ever so tight. That was called The Nearness of You, which is now considered very inappropriate. So we can't really get together. But that featured Molly Hammer. Molly left us way too soon here just a few months ago. And she was definitely a bright light on our stage many times over the past years. And so we are doing a tribute to honor her later this spring. But, you know, that was before, the good old days. And here is a picture of me at my first concert. Yes, the lights really make your eyes bead open when they're shining in your eyes. But anyway, I had no idea what we were in for at this time. This was March 7th last year. Also not exactly true, because I am a dual citizen of Italy, and I was watching very closely what was happening in my other country and Europe in January and February of 2020. And I did figure this wouldn't last forever, but I knew it was serious, and that it was going to definitely affect what we did. It was also impossible to think about, going back into the theater when all the schools were shut down too. And I was needing to virtually homeschool my six-year-old. But, it does take a lot of moving parts to launch a performance. And it was hard for us to just turn on a dime. We're a great nimble team, but we're also very small. And there's a lot that goes into planning a performance. From an artistic standpoint, the artistic director spends many, many hours to create new compositions and arrangements. And this can take months. And then comes the rehearsals and preparing musically for a performance to go off without a hitch, and making sure that, of course, we have the venue to perform in and that it's not shut down. As an executive director, I'm in charge of the money and the marketing, and it also takes months of preparation and many moving parts for a performance, from raising the money to allowing ourselves enough time to market the event so that we sell enough tickets, working with the venue and working with all of our vendors. And then, of course, being fantastic stewards of donor dollars. And then most importantly, making sure everybody gets paid in the end. And that all takes a lot of time. And even though there were times when we might have been able to open up, it just took a lot it would have taken so much to launch, and then also to do it safely. But there were about 3 factors that have helped guide me through this pandemic response. The first was luck, quite honestly. And at the time we were planning our annual fundraiser, and that was April 4th, 2020, and couldn't perform it, of course. So it typically raises 25% of the budget. And if the shutdown had happened 2 weeks earlier, we would not have been in the same financial position. In fact, we just really lucked out because we had raised all the money beforehand. But I called all of our donors, every one of them, and asked them if we could keep their donation, because it was to go to our annual operating anyway. And we still needed to sustain ourselves through that time. And of course, everybody was like, absolutely no problem. The second thing that helped guide me is I have a people first philosophy. Knowing that our musicians were struggling, we offered them in advance on the 2 shows that we postponed. We also applied for the PPP loan so that we wouldn't have to cut our small but mighty staff. And then from an audience and musician standpoint, I just couldn't go to bed at night knowing that I might be putting people at risk for a pandemic that we just didn't know anything about. And, sure, there were signs that we would have been just fine, but I just couldn't stomach that. We were still learning. So we cut as many expenses as possible. And I also knew this might be the best time to really assess the organization and make sure that we were poised for growth in the future. So that's what I've been laser focused on this whole year. And lastly, I didn't buy into the myth of momentum, that we still had to be somehow at the forefront of everything so that people wouldn't forget us. I knew that people were probably actually at home grieving and wiping down all their surfaces last year, and that it was probably, they probably weren't forgetting us or thinking about us either, remembering us. But I felt that it was more important to come out strong on the other side of this so that we could continue performing. And so I felt like it was okay to just take that pause and remain solvent and save ourselves and come back strong. I mean, that's why we have a marketing department and a publicist. So, you know, they have jobs when they come back. So would I rather go back to life and do what we do best? Absolutely. I mean, I really didn't want to do that, but it just seemed like for the best that to take that pause. And in the scheme of things, this was kind of a blip, or I hope it's just a blip. So no doubt, I definitely wanted to come back to life. And we didn't do nothing. We performed some drive-in concerts in the fall, and we're planning our season for the fall, which we ended up having to cancel, boo. But we did go virtual and had a few online offerings that we did, and we're and so this is how it started. Our artistic director was having no So that was then, like I said, our artistic director was having no more of this shutdown. So he created this song called Solitary Confinement and got the band together virtually to perform this. And now we're planning our first virtual fundraiser, which has been quite a trip. It's going to take place in a couple of weeks. Let's see if I can get it. There we go. On May 6th. And this will feature our first orchestral concert in more than a year. And we'll perform Mary Lou Williams' Zodiac Suite. We're looking forward to a 20th anniversary season in the next year or so, starting in 2022-23. But first, next year, we're looking to add a second series called Riff Generation. And for those of you who don't know what riff is, it's a repeated sequence of notes or chords, and it appears in a piece of music, and it can be kind of catchy, like da 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 da. Anyway, and it's often kind of helps give structure and character to a piece. Now, it can also be improvised. The development of jazz's early foundation was greatly defined by Kansas City's stylistic contributions to jazz, and popular songs like In the Mood or Shake, Rattle, and Roll were largely written in that style. And that emerged in Kansas City in kind of a sort of a jam session cultivation of music that it still lives on in clubs and basements around the world, but you're not going to really see that at the Kaufman Center, perhaps. But this double entendre, Riff Generation, is intended to shine a brighter light on this essential component of jazz. And so we're adding a standalone series of performances in a highly collaborative and improvisational sort of environment and it'll be a modern examination of the Kansas City's riff style. So we're going to audition musicians for a one-year residency, and they will perform and create new works and in a variety of settings. And it'll allow Kansas City Jazz Orchestra to engage more musicians and also more audiences. And it'll be in different settings. Like, I think we're going to start our first performances next winter in 2022 here. And I'm in Plex Pod in Westport. There's a theater here. So we're going to give that a try. And it'll be in addition to our main stage series. So we're going to offer something just a little bit different. It's very exciting. We're able to achieve this because we didn't spend money that we didn't have in order to keep that momentum. And so we'll be okay financially to start implementing these new initiatives that we're really excited to do. Many arts organizations are not so fortunate, however, and they don't have that cushion of support or the wherewithal to apply for loans like we did. And many don't have the capacity to survive without ticket sales. And so as a result, the arts have probably suffered the most in all of this, in this pandemic. I'd argue that. They weren't considered essential before. Usually it's the first thing cut from schools. They were essential, they would. And I've heard many of my theater college colleagues say that their parents weren't supportive and kept asking them when they get real jobs. And when my parents said that to me, they didn't say, don't get a real job. They just wanted me to get a job. And that wasn't an omission. They were always very supportive of my theatrical and artistic aspirations. So for that, I was truly grateful. But I think that there are a lot of, I'm probably the anomaly in that the real job mentality has kind of manifested itself in our society through, usually you have to have another job if you want to be a musician or if you want to be an artist, and people don't really want to pay you, or they want to pay you in like beer and pizza and peanuts and for exposure, for experience, and can you do me a favor? And you know, but what did we all do ultimately when we were shut in? What was almost one of the more essential things that we had was our entertainment, or at least our artistic entertainment. We had movies and books and music and to, you know, and nature too, to keep us occupied during that time. And it did become really important, but it wasn't the same. It just, going digital isn't the same. Am I right? You know, it's that energy that you feel in the theater is just palpable. And, you know, there's an exchange of energy, not just from the musicians to the audience, but the audience to the musicians, and they both feed off each other. So we really can't wait to get back together again. It's such a social thing because you can literally feel sound. And, you know, the two things that I heard the most since the shutdown is that people really wanted to eat in a restaurant and they really wanted to go see a live music again. So these two things are enormous industries that are a huge part of our culture. And I love food very much. I've been thinking about dinner since 8 o'clock this morning, but I am talking about the arts tonight, so I'll stick with the arts. So the arts maybe are not considered essential and that we're not like saving lives, although one could argue that they do, but they do make our lives worth living for. One thing that's not continually included in that adage is that the arts also tell our American story through music, dance, plays, quilts, poems. And, you know, as a musical genre, jazz is really right up there with kind of the most American music. It originated here in New Orleans in the late 1800s and kind of grew up in Kansas City in the 30s and 40s with that riff bebop style that was perfected here. And it's now performed all over the world. And musicians and other arts administrators who've chosen to stay here are local professionals, and they're telling their stories right here and right now. From an economic standpoint, however, The arts contribute, there we go, $276.1 million to the local economy. Now, this was from about 6 years ago, roughly. So I'm not sure how that's changed. And but this is the arts impact on Kansas City. So obviously Leavenworth probably has a different set of numbers, but I would guess that it's a kind of a same proportion percentage to that. So that's 179 million that is spent by the organizations hiring your bankers, electricians, carpenters, because you need all those for theater, staff, venues, caterers, transportation, musicians, especially artists. And then audiences go to these events and also go to restaurants and stay in hotels and window shop around these venues, and they pay for parking. Of course, I'm philosophically opposed to paying for parking, but it's a revenue generator. I'm not going to argue with that for the purposes of this slide. But it does generate, these things help in the economy, as well as tell our story collectively. So this portion of the economy that employs our local talent, generates revenue. I also believe it can really not be automated either. And it's impossible to outsource these things to. These people in our community have not fled to New York or LA or Chicago. They've created opportunities here locally and capture the culture of Leavenworth or Kansas City or West Plains or Omaha. Sorry, I guess my time's up. Oh, there's the lights. Excuse me. And my point is that I'd love to see us create these opportunities here and now. And the Kansas City Jazz Orchestra's role is to, well, first and foremost, entertain, but that is to also preserve jazz and create new standards to further the genre. The other thing is to educate young musicians so that they're skilled to play in our orchestra and around the nation, and that our skill attracts musicians from all over the nation as well. I also like to encourage all these young musicians out there, so spread the word, that they should create their own opportunities where they are instead of waiting for people to do it for them, because that is how things happen in the past. That's Jim Mayer and Gene Hall were doers, and they said, this is something that's missing. We're going to create these opportunities. This is so important to the arts and to the future of the arts. So this has been my role in the arts and how I've embraced it. And I could use your help too. I need your help spreading the word, because I think we're a small but mighty team tonight too, to make the arts as hospitable to people anywhere at any address by supporting them in your schools. So fighting for it. Visiting your jazz lounge. I think you have like the 424 lounge in downtown Leavenworth. Go to it when it's safe and support them.
Yes, we do. And it's a wonderful venue. Really, really. It's like a cool Kansas City Jazz Club, but in Leavenworth.
Good. Go to it. Enjoy. Support it. There attend performances by your River City Players and go on the art walks. Donate to them. I think the River City Players looks like they have a fun season coming up. If they can perform it, hopefully they can perform. And then personally, if you have a song in you or a novel in you or a quilt or a poem or a dance in you, create it. We need you, and we need your stories to create the fabric of American art. But don't let it stop with you. If you aren't already, bring the young people in your life along with you. And that could be a neighbor, it could be grandkids, it could be nieces or nephews, and it could be just a friend of the family, but help us pass this down to the next generations. It's actually my dream to see all the different generations at our concerts, a grandparent with their grandkid, an aunt with their niece, enjoying jazz together and sharing that experience together, so that when those kids grow up, that they continue appreciating the arts and passing our stories along. So before I leave you tonight and turn it over to question and answer, so there's a new story. Here's the newest story to our jazz genre. It's a composition by Clint Ashlock, who's our artistic director. And this was in partnership with KC PBS, and it aired, I think it was in November or December. But this is a new piece called Union Station. Enjoy. All right. These are all on YouTube if you want to watch them later. They do go on for 6 minutes at a time. But I want to thank you so much for your time tonight. And I'm grateful for this opportunity to talk about our past, present, and future. And thank you all for giving us a reason to do what we do. I mean, obviously we could perform all night, but if there are no lights on and there's no audience, there's really no point. But I do hope that you can come see us in the fall in the Kaufman Center or online, or even in the next few weeks when we perform the virtual Zodiac Suite by Mary Lou Williams. And if you're not already doing these things, no judgment, but I just hope that you'll join me on this artistic journey as a region to create arts at any address. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Leah. Does anybody have any questions for her? If you do, just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask. Okay. Again, I thank you all for joining us tonight. The library tries to support the arts as much as we can. We do invite musicians, artists, authors to come and speak at the library in a normal time. We've also been doing that on Zoom during the pandemic. And so we fully believe in a strong arts community. It also helps with educating young people and entertaining and calming adults. We do have a lot of people who are interested in jazz who are library patrons. So please watch our calendar for any upcoming events. Mm-hmm. And just a plug for another Library Week event we have coming up this week. On Thursday, we have a program that revolves around a film called Big Sonia. And Sonia is a Holocaust survivor who lives in Kansas City. Her granddaughter made a film about her a couple of years ago. And we have her granddaughter speaking to us on Thursday evening about her grandmother and the film. So I encourage you to check that out. You can check our website or our Facebook page, which is Leavenworth Public Library. And again, want to thank Leah for joining us and giving us a good background on the KC Jazz Orchestra and the arts scene in Kansas City in general.
Cindy,
Mhm.
It's Ruby.
Yes.
Hi, and I don't have a question, but a comment was made about the River City Community Players, and they are putting on Calendar Girl, and they start this weekend, and
Good.
it's like Friday through Sunday, and then the following weekend also. So they are up and running. Have to wear a mask and they're social distance, but they are functioning.
Oh, good. That's great to hear.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruby.
You're welcome.
And if nobody else has any other questions, I'll say thank you once again. And I hope you have a great rest of the week.
Thank you.